So, once again, I was reading a book that made me want to talk about another book in this week's Comic Book Wednesday. And today we're talking about The Superior Spider-Man. Book I was reading was the Spider-Verse crossover came out in 2014. And it was a crossover where, basically a bunch of different Spider-Man across the multiverse were getting hunted by this family of let's call them vampires. But they were basically being hunted for they were being hunted and eaten, right? Very good story crossover. But the star of that book was Peter Parker, the Spider-Man we know, and Otto Octavius, the superior Spider-Man. Okay, Superior Spider-Man, written by Dan Slott. Back in 2013, who would then go on to be one of the most prolific writers of just Spider-Man in general ever. I was about to say of the modern age, but ever. He's written maybe more books than anyone. He's written Spider-Man for a long time. But anyway, this came out back in 2013, and you heard right. It stars Otto Octavius as Spider-Man. One of the greatest story arcs ever written, in my opinion. That is why back when I had a Twitter, which I will always call it, my name on there was the Superior Spider Sam. For those not in the know, the Superior Spider-Man is a version of Spider-Man in which Dr. Octopus, who we all know and love, he was dying, right? And as he was dying, he decided to escape death with one master stroke. He was going to leave his dying body and transfer his consciousness into Peter Parker's body, Spider-Man's body, right? And he succeeded. But upon succeeding, he kind of made a promise to Peter, because Doc Ock, if you've watched any of the movies or read the comics, he's not actually a evil person who's like, I want to end all life type of person. He's a kind of a ends justify the means type of evil. Not to excuse him, but just so you know what he is. Point being that when this happened, he was like, you know what? I'm actually going to take up your mantle and I'm going to protect the city. I'm going to do it my way, but I will protect the city. So he dubbed himself the Superior Spider-Man. And this actually is a part of the Amazing Spider-Man run. So he was Spider-Man. This isn't a separate book or anything. So if you're one who's collecting all the issues, then I think this was issue like 700 to 733 or 701 to 733, because it's 33 issues total. At least the part I'm talking about. I should mention there are 3 volumes. I'm only talking about the first one because I have feelings about the other 2, because I like the way the first one really wrapped up the story. But anyway, so Otto has decided he's going to become Spider-Man, and he is very, very arrogant about it. He's still Otto Octavius, Doc Ock. He implements new technologies. He founds his own company called Parker Industries, which does very well. And, he actually is a really cool Spider-Man. And, if you've been watching me, you know that obviously he does things that our Spider-Man would not do, which is why I dug him so much. Like, he's very, very violent. Some cool things to look out for in this book, if the idea of Doc Ock being Spider-Man isn't cool enough for you. There is a storyline while he's in Peter Parker's body. Peter Parker's consciousness is also in there, but unknown to Otto. So Peter Parker's consciousness is, trying to fight for control of his body back, and doing things, leaving little clues that for people to find out. There's a point where, so Parker, he's trying to, get his body back, obviously. And I remember there's a great scene where he leaves a clue for somebody. And it's a clue that's really obvious for any of our smart Marvel characters. So either of the Ant-Mans, Iron Man, Reed Richards, anybody who, is known for being smart. If they were in the room, they would have been like, oh, something's odd here. That's not Peter. And I remember it's funny because the only people in the room were Captain America and Thor and Wolverine and the stuff, people like that. And they just didn't notice. And I thought it was funny. But, of course, Otto himself was like, whoa, what's going on here? Why would my body do this? So that's a little cool thing going on there. Their little, I guess, conscious battle. Watching Otto be a hero, that's probably the best part of the book, man. like some of the villains he fights, he doesn't fight them the same way Spider-Man fights them. Like I said, like there's a great scene where he fights the Kingpin. And as he's fighting the Kingpin notices, like, yo, this dude is like violent. And it gets to the point where the Kingpin is shook. And he's like, whoa, what's going on here? It's like, aren't you just gonna you're acting different, I thought you'd come and arrest me. And it's a great line I'll never forget where Superior Spider-Man says, oh, you misunderstand what this is. I'm not coming to arrest you. This is regicide, which, if you don't know, that is the murder of a king. So he's basically saying murder kingpin. So good. So good. Then there's another villain he fights who has the same idea Otto Octavius had to steal a body. He's like, ha, I'm going to steal your body, Spider-Man, and now yours is mine. And Otto was like, oh, what you thought you could do this to me? Come on, bruh. I invented this. So, like, just watching him outsmart these villains and these villains that, he obviously used to work with or know, it's really good. He also forms, a little romance here that ends up being important in, comic lore later. But that's something that's nice to read. But probably the best thing about the book to me is the character arc that Otto goes on. So, like I said, so Peter, I mentioned, there's a part where he's like leaving clues for people to find, right? But even without leaving clues, people or one person essentially starts realizing, something is wrong with Spider-Man. Like, you notice he's different, right? So she starts putting all these clues together. And then one of Spider-Man's greatest villains also puts these clues together. They figure out like what's going on. They're like, yo, someone else is doing something here. That villain ends up being like the grand villain of the entire 33 issue run. And what's amazing to me is Otto, after all these fights, all these people like that I mentioned that he's outsmarted and all these fights he's had and all the success he's had, this one villain he can't beat. Or maybe a better way to put it is it's someone he can't outsmart because they've kind of found a counter for everything. And at this point, you've seen Otto just be this arrogant, kind of, like lovable douchebag. And he makes like this grand sacrifice that's just it was amazing to watch. You're like, yo, I don't know how you're going to win. And then, he does this thing and you're like, yo, I can't, like, you can't believe he does it. You can't believe that he does it. And he really becomes a great hero. Of course, his journey with the other spider, like I said, he was one of to start this whole thing off, I was talking about how I was reading Spider-Verse. He's one of the people leading the other Spider-Men in their fight against these, I forget what they're called. Hold on. The Inheritors. Sorry, I could not remember their name. The Inheritors, and Morlun is one of them. If you're familiar with him, he essentially, again, he's like a vampire. He like drains their life force. But anyway, Otto Octavius's part in that is also really good. And I remember something that's cool is Spider-Verse is kind of like it's kind of timey-wimey for my Doctor Who fans there. So it happens kind of out of order a little bit. So in one issue of the Superior Spider-Man, you see Otto leave and then immediately come back and his clothes are rattled or whatever, and he's saying something and you don't really understand what it means. But then, you get to Spider-Verse and you read these issues, you understand what it means. And it was so good to see. And yeah, man, really loved it. Really loved it. So Superior Spider-Man, 33 issues. I have all these single issues somewhere. Now, I'm not obviously going to tell you go out my 33 individual issues. I do think that's the best way to read this one. But I mean, like, so if you're a collector, maybe do that. Or if, you're really into it, I would say that's the best way to do it. For this one, I'm not really into the trades only because I've flipped through a trade before and I don't really like where they end in at least the first two. I'm not really a fan of like how they leave it off. But I mean, hey, trades are cheaper. They're definitely going to be easier to find. And it's a story you need to read. So I would definitely recommend going that route. Or even better, maybe just go digital if you don't mind that and go on Comixology or Kindle or anything or something like that. And then you can get the individual issues right on your tablet and read them. So that's also an option. Anyway, thank you for listening to me rant. Superior Spider-Man. If you liked it, let me know what you thought about it. Let me know what you think of Dan Slott's run altogether. What was your favorite arc in his run? Because he's a writer of mine that I really enjoyed. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. And until next time, I'm out.